Don't you dare mind-wash Paramount to block that settlement with Trump. Recently, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett took the floor with an energy that shook the establishment's pillars. At the center of this storm was an explosive claim: Bernie Sanders, a progressive icon to many, had allegedly urged media conglomerate Paramount not to settle an ongoing legal standoff involving former President Donald Trump. What followed was not just a clash of political ideals, it was a confrontation of motives, a bold unmasking that saw Crockett questioning allegiances, challenging narratives, and ultimately breaking Sanders' composure with one calculated word. The entire country watched in disbelief as what seemed like a routine committee discussion quickly turned into a moment that would be etched in political memory for years. This was not just a disagreement, it was an exposure. Jasmine Crockett stood calmly, her voice firm, her tone unwavering. As she looked across the chamber, the nation leaned in closer to their screens, some assuming she was gearing up to direct her firepower toward the usual Republican targets. Instead, she turned and addressed Sanders directly. With a file in one hand and a conviction in her voice, she spoke of backdoor communications and mounting pressure on Paramount executives. Her claim? That Senator Sanders, under the guise of preserving democratic institutions, had directly urged Paramount not to resolve their legal wrangle with Trump, specifically one that could have favored the former president's media ambitions. It was the kind of accusation that could fracture alliances, a progressive versus progressive confrontation that rewrote the expectations of party loyalty. Crockett wasn't merely criticizing, she was prosecuting, in public, in real time, with receipts. As she flipped through the documents, she cited instances of internal email chains, unreported Zoom calls, and statements that had somehow evaded the mainstream press. She highlighted one email thread dated just a week prior, in which a senior Paramount executive allegedly mentioned feeling political pressure from progressive leaders to resist settlement efforts with the Trump team. While the name Bernard Sanders wasn't outright typed in those exchanges, Crockett pointed to language and timestamps that aligned suspiciously with Sanders' own schedule and press statements during that period. The implication was not subtle, it was a direct challenge, and Bernie Sanders, seated only a few feet away, furrowed his brow as the walls of silence began crumbling around him. Crockett's tone escalated slightly, not with anger, but with righteous frustration. She emphasized that fighting Trump through shadowy pressure tactics not only contradicted the ideals of transparency Sanders himself long championed but also risked empowering the very media manipulations the left often decried. She questioned why someone as seasoned and respected as Sanders would privately interfere in a legal business matter, rather than confronting it through legislative or public avenues. She posed this to the room, and more importantly, to the millions watching live. Her interrogation wasn't just about Sanders, it was about the credibility of their shared movement. She made it clear, if progressives wanted moral superiority over Trump's machinery, they had to be better, not simply craftier. She then asked a question that sliced into the heart of the matter: is our mission to defeat Trump by any means, or to rise above the games he plays? The room went still, the silence more thunderous than applause. She accused Sanders, in essence, of doing the very thing progressives criticize their opponents for: playing politics behind the curtain while preaching transparency on stage. And then, with surgical precision, she landed the blow that made headlines across every network and trending page in the country. One word: intent. That single word, spoken with controlled intensity, echoed through the room like a siren. Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. She let the gravity of her word do the work. Intent, she said again, turning to Sanders, her eyes piercing through layers of political armor. Even if you didn't say it directly, even if there's no signed document, even if no cameras caught the conversation, if the intent was to prevent a legal resolution that could help Donald Trump rebuild his media empire, isn't that just manipulation dressed up in moral clothes? Sanders shifted in his chair. For a man so known for composure, for staying firm in the storm, the moment marked an unusual crack in the facade. He blinked, tried to respond, began to explain that his concerns were based on Trump's use of media to spread misinformation and incite division. He repeated that he never instructed anyone at Paramount. He didn't deny speaking to media leaders, he couldn't, really, but he insisted it was advice, not pressure. Crockett leaned in slightly. That's not the question, she said. The question is not whether you gave orders. The question is, did your words carry the intent to block a settlement that didn't suit your vision of justice? If the result of your advice was to freeze negotiations, what difference does it make if you didn't use force? It's not about what you meant to say, it's about what you meant to happen. The room grew denser with discomfort. Crockett wasn't simply accusing, she was asking the country to reflect on something deeper: how we excuse bad behavior when it comes from people we like. How we let noble causes become shields for questionable methods. She reminded everyone of Sanders' legacy as the outsider, the truth teller, the man who refused to play by Washington's rules. And she asked the room, had he become a part of the machinery he once dismantled? Crockett brought up past statements Sanders made condemning corporations who yielded to political interference. She quoted him verbatim from a 2016 interview, in which he said, "Any form of private coercion on public media platforms threatens the soul of democracy." Then she asked him to explain how pressuring a private media company to not make a deal with Trump didn't fall under that same category. Her delivery was precise, her voice calm, but the message had the impact of a thunderclap. Sanders, visibly rattled now, said he stood by his opposition to Trump's media influence, calling it dangerous and toxic to truth. Crockett agreed, but turned that very agreement into a rhetorical trap. "We can all agree Trump is dangerous," she said, "but the moment we justify crossing lines to stop him, we become architects of new danger. If the rules only apply when it's convenient, what separates us from him?" And it was then that Sanders said nothing. He looked down at his notes, then at the documents in Crockett's hands, and then back at her, silently, not in anger, not in defiance, but in pause, because there was truth in her critique, and everyone in the room could feel it. The energy shifted. Crockett wasn't out for blood, she was out for integrity. The confrontation went beyond a legal dispute. It touched on a broader anxiety in American politics, how easily noble missions can be twisted when filtered through unchecked power. Crockett knew she had touched a nerve, but she didn't press harder. Instead, she pivoted the conversation toward what comes next. She called for legislation that would codify ethical boundaries for lawmakers' private communications with media corporations. She said that power, even in the hands of the righteous, should be watched. Her words were met with murmurs of approval from across the aisle. Commentators later described the moment as the day Crockett put fire under her own house to prove her roof was strong. She didn't merely hold Sanders accountable, she made accountability a progressive value again. It wasn't just political theater, it was a blueprint for how to build a movement that doesn't lose its soul in the process of winning. In the days following the event, reaction poured in from all corners of the political spectrum. Progressive loyalists were torn. Some felt Crockett had taken a private issue and weaponized it, but far more praised her for demanding consistency and holding everyone, no matter their stature, to the same ethical bar. Even conservative media outlets, typically critical of Crockett, acknowledged the bravery it took to challenge someone so revered within her own camp. Meanwhile, Sanders issued a carefully worded follow-up statement, avoiding any direct apology but acknowledging that his interactions with media executives must always be transparent and principled. That sentence alone showed the ripple effect of Crockett's confrontation. Paramount, for its part, declined to comment on the internal communications exposed by Crockett but confirmed it was reviewing its policies regarding political outreach. Insiders claimed that phone calls from elected officials would now be documented and logged to ensure future accountability. It was clear, Crockett's revelations had done more than expose a moment. They had triggered policy shifts and cultural introspection within both politics and media. Crockett, meanwhile, refused to ride the wave of political clout. Instead of doing interviews or basking in the spotlight, she returned to her community and began hosting transparency town halls, where constituents could ask her anything and hear the backstory behind the confrontation. Her message to them was simple: power is only legitimate when people can see how you use it. I will always choose the risk of honesty over the comfort of silence. And those weren't just words, they were her ethic. Even months later, political observers pointed back to the word intent as a turning point in how influence is discussed in Washington. What Crockett did wasn't just about Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. It was about redefining what integrity means in a time when politics is often reduced to tribes and teams. She reminded the nation that democracy isn't just about policy, it's about principle. And that's why this moment will be remembered, not as a takedown, but as a wake-up call. Jasmine Crockett didn't seek to dismantle Sanders' legacy. She sought to protect its meaning. She didn't reject progressivism. She purified it. She didn't break the party. She reminded it that values only mean something when they apply universally. If you found this breakdown compelling and want to stay informed on moments that shape the political landscape with courage and integrity, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that matters.